programme, I am kind of looking to kind of boost each individual artist's perspective and their personal practice. So I'm looking to do an early morning crit, which is a bit more focused with people that they might want to respond to their work, and have like quite intimate discussions as well. And I was planning a curator's talk as well to kind of think about how each work kind of parasitises against each other in the space. I think that's an important part of the exhibition, to think about if the artists who are actually responding to the manifesto, how their work actually parasitises off another one, and how they kind of, benefit each other. So that's what I'm kind of trying to get out of it. The Socio-Parasitology term actually started a few years ago. I started working on the term a few years ago and thinking about the positive aspects of people as parasites. And it was only at the beginning of this year, actually, that I finalised and wrote a manifesto that discusses current important terms to do with rethinking people who are immigrants and people who are seen in like a pejorative way in the media, how to repurpose that, and the terminology and negative terminology that is used against them, such as parasite or illegal alien, and current things like Donald Trump is saying at the moment as well. How to rethink that in a positive, progressive way, and not be putting up more like borders. And I think the aims of the manifesto started when I saw it started a few years ago when I saw there was a gap in how people were being seen and how people were being treated to what they were actually doing. So there obviously are so many beneficial aspects of people as migrants who come into the new hosting environment, and that was kind of diminished in a way, and the term refugee and migrant was being misused so much in terms of saying a group of people are migrants when they were actually refugees, and whereas they didn't actually have that kind of joining policy that comes with being a migrant, even though they were a refugee. So the purpose of the manifesto was to kind of bring forward a new perspective and a new working model that can be used to rethink people as parasites. I think Shades do a lot of educational based like events, and Shades actually work within the kind of social justice and diversity field that I'm really interested in. And for me, mixing like an ethnographic research background in people and cultures and stuff, and with current scientific news and information about parasites, I felt like Shades was the best place for me to work with. So my role within the event is I'm the curator and directing with Shades the exhibition and finding the artists that work with the manifesto, like surrounding themes to do with migration, social justice, policy making, that kind of surrounding series of themes. So my role is finding the artists and curating the exhibition. So a positive parasite-host relationship for me is, so you have the parasite and the host in terms of biological relationships, that species relationship. So you have the parasite and the host. When the parasite enters the new host or hosting environment or hosting body, that in-between point, that point of interruption is the positive parasite. So it's actually the intermediate stage and the connecting part between the parasite and host. And how I've related this to the issues that I'm seeing now with like rethinking the migrant as actually beneficial for the new hosting environment is that the migrant enters the new hosting environment, and that point that it goes into the new hosting environment, that interruption is the positive parasite. So they are in fact changing the new environment, and that is positive. So that would be an example of that. So for me, interruption and disruption are two separate things. An interruption for me is a very positive side of relating to the environment and acting with people and microsocial interactions in terms of face-to-face interactions, and I feel like all those situations are forms of interruptions, where you interrupt another person, and it can be positive. Whereas a disruption, for me, is very kind of... If you look at like dramatic forms of social change, such as natural disasters and stuff like that, that is a disruption for the environment, because that's a rapid movement. Whereas an interruption, for me, is a slow, progressive series of acts that happen. So with agency, I feel like you need agency in order to be productive and cause an interruption. And that sense of bodily agency that people have, they're physically interrupting other people and they're interrupting the new environment. And how I see the migrant in relation to this is the repurposing of the metaphor that's been used with the migrant, such as a parasite. The migrant caravan that went through, like, they got into the US because of during Congress. That is a form of like positive interruptions, because they actually just they interrupted that. I think autonomy is quite similar to agency in the sense that you're bringing forward something in order to actively to create change. But autonomy, if you do think about it in terms of the individual and the group, autonomy would fall into both, because I only think about the social parasite as a form of social group that's forming, like how social groups are formed are based on autonomy and agency. When I talk in the manifesto about ectoparasitic and endoparasitic perspectives, it's kind of driven from the original biological sense of what a parasite can be. So ectoparasitic is living on the host, when the parasite lives on the host. And endoparasitic is when the parasite lives within the host. So I've been looking into intestinal gut parasites, which are actually beneficial for the body, and there's been a lot of current research and new information that's come out from endoparasites, which actually fight off more dangerous diseases and cancerous things when there is that parasite within your body. It actually toughens your intestinal gut. So those perspectives in relation to what I'm talking about is looking at how the migrant body and the migrant labour, that kind of laborious thing that happens, that actually strengthens the nation. It doesn't weaken it. So a pejorative perspective is a polemical, kind of unapologetic, negative idea and connotations that surround a certain type of person. It's pejorative just in a sense means negative, but it's enforced. Pejorative kind of is enforced with hierarchy as well, which is what I have an issue with. I think this is a global issue. So in terms of the ethnographic problem with this, it is a global issue. The misuse and mistreatment of migrants as parasites has been going on for so long, even from 1900s with the coolie trade as well. That started off with using derogative language to kind of rework a certain type of person, and then that social grouping was kind of enforced on them. So that pejorative perspective was kind of driven throughout history, and that's what's happened with the migrant as well. And it was in 2016 when the Brexit deal, when the Brexit situation came out, that was the kind of catalyst for me to kind of start rethinking that what can I actively do to kind of help this group of people. I mean, in the media, it's, if you look on BBC, they're saying it in one way, whereas Al Jazeera is saying it another way. So it is that kind of the syntax that's being used on BBC and ITV News and Al Jazeera as well. The things that policymakers are actually saying about immigrants in this country, and they're saying, they're detrimental to the country, they're really removing resources, like 1990s when in California when Mexicans went to California in 1990s, that whole influx of people, they were seen as removing things from the nation, and they weren't as nativist as the current people wanted them to be. And that whole need for assimilation is the current problem that's continuous. That's what I'm kind of resisting.